Hello, I'm David from the Three Orcs channel. Today I'm going to create a fighter character with a new player in the Castles Crusades rule set in Fantasy Grounds. Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm glad I was able to help you with this. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Matt. Pretty new. Happy to be here.
Hi, Matt. Okay, Matt, we talked about this, that you wanted to create a fighter. And we talked a little bit about your race choices. So let's go ahead and start from the very beginning. I know you know how to play, use Fantasy Grounds with other rule sets, so that will speed things up quite a bit. The reason I'm doing this is to show you the differences between the two rule sets, because there's certain things you have to look out for. So let's go ahead and start with creating a character. The first thing you need to do is open up the character selection screen. Top right hand corner, there's a characters icon. I believe they call it a banner. It's a character's banner in the top right hand corner. And you're going to be looking at a character selection screen. So I see that you're M sharp and you started a character. So I'll look at that with you and I'll follow along. So I'll explain the differences between what is automated and what is you have to type in manually. So the first thing at the top is the name field. So go ahead and type in the character's name or a placeholder name for now. You can change it later.
Put me on the spot right away, okay?
It doesn't matter. You can change it later. Just something to show for now. Garm Blackrock. Okay, looks like you might be a dwarf. Okay, the next is race. So at this point, you're going to have to type this in manually, but let's go ahead and look at the races. In the banner on the right-hand side of the screen, open up races, and you'll see a list of races to choose from. I know you didn't look at this too closely, but you were talking about either being a human or a dwarf. Just to remind everybody, to play a human, you get 3 primes. As a dwarf, you'll get 2 primes to choose from in creating this character. Go ahead and type in dwarf. In other rule sets, this is automated where you drag it over, but in this one, and on this particular tab, you have to type it in. Under class, you're going to type in fighter because you chose to be the fighter class. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the fighter class as well. On the right-hand side in the banner, under classes, open up fighter. And we'll have that open at the same time so we can refer to both as we're making the characters. Okay, now next is level. In the level field, type in the number 1. You're going to be a first level character. On the player name field, go ahead and type in your name. So in the experience point field, the very first field is how many current experience points you have. The right field is how many experience points you need to get to second level. If you go to the fighter article, you'll see that at the very bottom of the article is a chart. You're going to need 2,001 experience points to get to second level. There you go. Okay, the next section is the attributes. So the first thing you need to do is roll your stats. So you're going to roll 4 dice 6 in the field below and pick the best 3. And then you can put them in any order that you want. Hey, you have a great start so far. You're doing fantastic. You're a hero of the realm. The kingdom of the dwarves are going to miss you. Hey, getting better. I'd put that in your charisma. Perfect. The greatest character ever. Okay, so we're just going to continue so you can see how to make this character. Okay, so as a dwarf, you're going to get 2 primes. So as a fighter, you realize, of course, it's like in any other game, the strength is to hit and damage, the dexterity adds to your armor class, constitutional adds to your hit points every time you go up a level. All 3 stats are completely different when it comes to savings throws and skill checks. Okay, so now you need to roll for your hit points. So if you look at the fighter article, you see that you use die 10 for hit dice. So you need to roll 10-sided die. Nice. Okay, you have 8 hit points. Type in 8 there. Real quick, if you click on the mini menu right below that, it says mini. You can use that little sub menu while you're playing the game. Okay, now next we're going to go ahead and take a look at the rest of this tab. We're still on the main tab. We're going to have to look at the race. The Dwarven race has certain abilities. Now, these abilities will be imported into the abilities tab, but we should notate some of these on your front page to remind you that you have these. So let's go through the list again. Racial affinity. I don't see there's no note. There's not a note you need to make about that, or environment. But the animosity for elves, you should write that down. So you have 3 fields to choose from on this main tab: special defense, special movement, and senses. For animosity, I'd probably put that down under senses. So type in animosity and then -2 CHA. Yeah, there you go. So that way it'll remind you later when you're role playing. Okay, deep vision is under senses. So type in deep vision 120 feet. Then the determined depth isn't a number, but you can type that down if you want. Determine underground. You need to abbreviate that somehow. It's up to you. So enmity for orcs and goblins. Looks like we're gonna run out of room here. It looks like we're gonna run out of room here for all this stuff. Can you try typing more on that line and see if it extends? I never tried that before. No, it stops. That's too bad. Okay, so you got these 3 different fields to choose from to spread this all out. These are just notes for yourself to remember later. And you can condense some of this stuff too if you want. You have special defenses field in the middle of that page. So type in +4 armor class versus giants and ogres. +4 AC armor class. Okay, good. Also, you get +3 save versus spells. And you also have +2 versus fear. You might want to abbreviate all this so much more than you are. I would just put +3 versus VS spells, no dot. Abbreviate it quite a bit. Yeah. Get rid of the dot too. There you go. Whatever you can do to save space. And you also get a +2 against fear. And you also get +2 versus poison. You could just say +2 poison fear. That'll save space. There you go. And that's it. That's all your special abilities. So also your attribute modifiers. You get +1 constitution, -1 dexterity. So go ahead and change that now. You have to do that manually. So next is the abilities tab. So click on abilities. You should still have the dwarf article and the fighter article open. So in the top left-hand corner of each article is a brown dot. Brown dots is what opens everything, and you can also drag it. So drag both dots into the abilities tab.
Fighter and dwarf.
Yes. There you go. Look at all those abilities that you have. So the field on the left is what level you get that at. Okay, the next on the list in the abilities tab is the secondary skills menu. So to find the secondary skills, you'll have to have the Castle Keeper's Guide player companion loaded up. And then you're going to have to open up the secondary skills menu. There we go. So based on your background, now this is optional, by the way, because this is in the Castle Keeper's Guide. We can either hand write a background describing how you were raised, the environment that you grew up in, were you an urchin on the streets, that it's an orphan, or you're raised by a fisherman or a blacksmith, and that will determine what kind of skills you have going forward in the game. So you can role play that on the cuff. But another way to do that is you can fine tune that descriptions of what you know by this list here. You can pick as many of these as you want to reflect your background, to how you were raised before you became an adventurer. Going through this list will take some time because you're going to have to read them, and some of the descriptions are more elaborate and more encompassing than you would think, because they tried to narrow the list as much as they could. So you'd have to go through this and think about it based on your background, and then you'll just drag these over to your abilities tab too. And you'll just use these as reference, but not just reference, but they're also tied to attribute stats, so you'll know what you need to roll on.
Okay, I'll just pick one.
Okay. There you go. So you did pick one, blacksmithing. So whenever you do anything that regards to blacksmithing, you see that brown dot on the right-hand side of blacksmithing? It'll open it up, and you can read what it means, what it does. And it's an attribute of a strength check to be able to perform anything that's related to that background skill, which is more for role-playing purposes. So before we go any farther, there is something we skipped that we need to go back for. So we're done with the abilities tab, but you need to go back to the main tab again, and you have to pick out your 2 primes. Because you're a fighter, it's required that you have to pick strength. So to do that, you need to click on the word strength, the attribute strength, until it turns red. Red means it's a prime. That's all automated. So when you use that ability for a saving throw or a skill check in the game, it's all automated. It knows that it's a prime or not. In fact, you can try that right now. Go ahead and double click on the +2 bonus field and read the description in the chat window. See, that tells the Dungeon Master and you that is a prime. So I know you need a 12 or higher, plus your attribute bonus, plus your level, and any other pluses or minuses for challenge level. There you go. And Constitution is your 2nd prime. Okay, next on the list is starting coin. You're going to have to roll up starting coin. So go to the Player's Handbook and the Quick Reference Guide. And in here, you're going to go for look up starting money, starting gold. There's an article called Starting Gold, and a fighter gets 3 die 8 times 10. So go ahead and roll 3 8-sided die in the chat window and times that by 10, and that's what your starting gold will be. Awesome. So 160 gold, you need to type that into your inventory tab. So you have to predefine your inventory tab. So start at the top with platinum, gold, silver, copper. So it's PP, GP, SP, CP. There, you probably want to use capital letters because I believe the programming for the inventory uses caps. I'm not 100% sure, but we better make sure it stays the same. Okay, now we're going to deal with inventory. So I don't know what you've heard about the game, but there's a lot more automation going on here than people might have mentioned. So the encumbrance is automated with the inventory. It automatically keeps track of all that. So what we're going to do is you're going to go ahead and spend your starting coin and buy equipment for your character. And to do that, you need to go to equipment lists in the Player's Handbook. And I guess we could start off with armor or weapons. Which one do you want to start with? Okay, so click on armor. You're going to open up all the available armor in the game. And to read the description of the armor, you'll have to click on the brown dot. So everybody starts off with armor class 10. And the armor bonus to adjust your armor class is there in the chart there. The EV value on the right is how much it weighs. So EV in Castles Crusades is an equivalent value of how much something weighs in conjunction with the size of the item. They combine size and weight into one value, and the character sheet actually keeps track of that. To determine the total encumbrance rating of your character, Castles and Crusades counts your strength number for the EV. So your strength is 16. That means you have a 16 EV limit. Also, you get a +3 for every strength prime and constitution prime. So you got +3 for strength and you got +3 for constitution. So that's a total of 22 EV. And there you go. Your encumbrance rating is 22 before you become burdened. Okay, so now you need to pick out a piece of armor with your 160 gold. Scale mail. Excellent. Okay, so right now it's carried. So there's a little symbol on the right-hand side of your inventory tab of that line item of scale mail. And right now you're carrying it. Now you've got it equipped. And click it one more time. And again. Okay, so it's carried, technically equipped. Okay, I thought there might have been a worn option, but equipped is it. It looks like a shirt. So the scale mail that you just purchased and added to your inventory tab has an equipped or carried icon on the right, and you just equipped it, and that'll add the EV value down automatically to the total encumbrance at the bottom of the seat. If you unclick it, so it's 0, watch what happens to your total encumbrance. Go ahead and click it again so there's nothing in that, no symbol showing. See, your total encumbrance is 0 now. Okay, so now that after you purchased your scale mail and equipped it, you probably want a shield. So if you scroll down in the armor article, there's a different section for shields. If you read the description of the armor, some of this armor includes a helm or a coif, by the way. The way this game works is if for some reason a monster or NPC targets your head has armor class 10. And then you add the helm adjusted AC to it to increase the armor class of your head. Plus dexterity. The only time that'll ever happen is under certain circumstances, like you're sticking your head around a corner or through a hole or something. And that's the only thing they can aim at. Okay, so next is weapons. So go ahead and open up the weapons equipment list. So this game will let you know, in the fighter article tells you what weapons you're allowed to have, and fighters pretty much can use any weapon and any armor, as shows here. So basically, you can buy any weapons you want that the DM allows, dependent on the campaign world and what you can carry and what you can afford. Now, there's a couple things that's a little different about some of these weapons. Some have special abilities. That's what I mentioned before about background and characters. Some weapons are two-handed, some are one. Some, like the Bastard Sword, has a damage rating for two-handed and a separate damage rating for one-handed. Some can trip, some can overbear or knock people down. Some have range or reach. Some do double damage when somebody charges you. Some do double damage when you're charging them, like jousting from a horse. There's also certain pole arms that have reach. The way reach works in this game is if something has a longer reach than you, like 10 feet versus 5 feet, they get automatic initiative when you close initially for combat. So if you're gonna charge or approach an ogre, they have a 10-foot reach. At the beginning of combat, they're gonna have automatic initiative and be able to strike at you first. Oh, now that you purchased these, let's go back to the combat tab. I'm gonna show you something. That automatically filled in the weapons below, the weapons form. The weapons list is automatically filled in. And as you can see, the hand axe already has 2 line items, one for melee and one for throwing. if you put your cursor over the little sword, it says melee, and the other one says thrown. In the ammo section under hand axe, there's an ammo field. Go ahead and type in number 2 in there because you have 2 hand axes. And you can see there's 2 little check marks there, so you can actually uncheck them to keep track of your ammo. And the range listed is short range. So medium range is double, and then long range is triple. So short, anything within 10 feet is medium, short range. Anything within 20 feet is medium range. You get -2 to hit. And anything within 30 feet is long range, and you have -6 to hit. Javelins are thrown weapons as well. And you have 1 javelin, so you want to put ammo there for how many javelins you have. There you go. So also what I want to show you is, I know you're trying to make a character, but I want to also show how to add other kind of weapons to a fighter class as part of this video. So let's go ahead and add a light crossbow. You don't have to buy it, just drag it over. Okay, so let's go back to the combat tab. And as you can see, the light crossbow has a range of 80. And the ammo is how many bolts you have in your inventory. So you'd have to buy them separately, then you type them in. And it'll keep track of every single bolt here. Pretty nice. So it's pretty much automated when it comes to stuff like that. So another thing I want to do is show a special weapon for video use, because some people might want to do this. A couple different things. So let's go ahead and get a bastard sword. I know you're a dwarf, but I just want to show what a bastard sword does. So drag a bastard sword over to your inventory. There you go. So if you look back at your combat tab, you see it's listed as a melee weapon. So if you use it as a normal melee weapon, the way it's listed there, it says the bastard sword does die 12 damage when used with 2 hands. But right now, it says in the description of the sword that it's one-handed weapon, and it does 1 to 10 points of damage, which reflects in the line item. It's a 10-sided die that's in that field. So we need to create another version of this that's a 2-handed version. So I'm going to do that for you. So I'm going to add another line item, add item, then I'm going to type in sword. If I spelled it right, that'd be nice. You can label these any way you want, by the way. They don't have to. These are just labels. They don't affect the programming at all. Sword bastard. And then in parentheses, I'm going to type in, oops, 2-handed. I'll just put 2 8s for 2-handed. You can type in anything you want there. It doesn't matter. So the damage for 2-handed is die 12. So I'm going to take a 12-sided die and drag it into that field. There we go. So I just created a 2-handed version of that weapon to use in combat, which is pretty nice. Now I want to do something else. You have weapon specialization. So let's go ahead and add that right now. What weapon would you like weapon specialization in? You get +1 to hit, +1 to damage as a fighter. The Warhammer. So we're going to look at the Warhammer here. And I'm going to click on the magnifying glass. The magnifying glass is what that you can edit the weapon to attack and to damage. You can adjust it that way. So if you click on the magnifying glass and you see under it, there's 2 fields. There's 2 line items called attack and damage. In an attack line item is your BT8, which is 1 because you're a first level fighter. We didn't fill that in yet. In fact, let's do that right now before we go any farther. At the top right-hand side of your screen, in the bonus to hit field, type in number 1 there. There you go. If you look at your fighter character sheet article, and if you scroll to the very bottom to that chart that tells you how many hit dice you get per level, there's a BT8 column. That's bonus to hit. That means at that level, that's your bonus to hit. That's your plus to hit in combat. So your BT8 in this character sheet is +1. Okay, so we got that taken care of. Let's go back to your Warhammer here that you have weapon specialization. So Warhammer, before we do anything else, I'm going to type in something for you. I'm going to abbreviate this. Weapon there. I think that's abbreviation for specialization. You know, you can type in whatever you want there, but that's what I typed in. So you know that that's what you have weapon specialization in. And you probably should put a note of that in the front of your character sheet on the main tab, just to remind you what you're specialized in. And you can also put that in the abilities tab too. But before we go there, let's finish this editing up of this weapon. So in the attack field, the attack line item, type in the number 1, because it's your BT8 plus ability, which is your strength, plus any kind of miscellaneous modifier, which is your weapon specialization. So yeah, there you go. So you type in number 1 there. And then your damage field, same thing. You added a +1 to your damage because of your weapon specialization. So if you look, so you can go ahead and hit the magnifying glass to close it again. And if we look at the item now, you get +4 to hit, and you get +3 to damage, which is much higher than any other weapon that you have. It's all reflected there. There you go. You rolled, you got 13, but 7 points of damage. You're pretty vicious with that. So let's go ahead and modify the abilities tab. So go to abilities and find weapon specialization, and go ahead and click at the end of the word specialization, and in parentheses type in Warhammer. That way you'll remember later what you're specialized in. I think you can do that. You might have to edit the list. There you go. Yeah, this will remind you later what you did. And then on the main tab, you know, you can always put that here too, but you don't have to. Just notes for yourself. Okay, so let's go back to the combat tab. So right now, you got a lot of choices in your combat tab. So let's go ahead and add one more thing that's very common for players to do in this game, and you can do it too. And I can see you doing this in the future. I know you have a shield, but let's say for some reason, at some point in the game, you want to use 2 weapons at the same time. It's not a skill that you have to get. Anybody can do it. But the problem is it's -3 to hit in your primary hand and -6 to hit in your secondary hand. And also the secondary weapon has to be smaller. So we want to automate that. So there's different ways of automating it, and the way I do it is I create more line items. You don't have to do it that way. There's also an effects way to do it, a modifier way to do it, and you'd have to actually create the modifier for that effect. But you can also create it as a line item too. So that means you would create a dual wielding version of your hammer for your primary, and then you'll create a secondary version of your hand axe as your secondary weapon. And you can add the -3 to hit and -6 to hit to those line items. That's how you would do it. That's how I would do it, but there's other ways of doing it in this game too. So this is a lot of ways to create weapons in your character sheet. So one more thing that's great about this, it's kind of cumbersome to play the game looking at this sheet, looking at this tab. So the way to get around that is the mini sheet. So at the top of the weapons form, there's a little yellow window called mini, and it opens up a submenu called weapons. So right now it's blank. So to fix that is, if you look at all your line items, all your weapons, it says carried. You're actually just carrying them. They're not equipped. So go ahead and equip your hand axe and see what happens. Now look at your little submenu that you opened up. Isn't that so much easier to use in game versus the combat tab? It's a beautiful thing. Your ammo's even there too. So, yeah, this is really a cool thing. I like it a lot. Okay, let's move on to the top of the combat tab. So at the top left-hand corner, there's initiative. The way Castles Crusades work is it's a die 10 for initiative. So double-click on it, and you can roll initiative. Go ahead and double-click on initiative, and you'll see how it works in the chat window. Dexterity only comes into play to break ties. The miscellaneous field is for anything like a magic item or a spell effect. Movement, top right hand corner. So right now your move is 0. Your base move for a dwarf is 20 feet per round. I'm looking at the dwarf character sheet. So in the base field, type in 20, and now you have a movement of 20. The miscellaneous is for other modifiers for like maybe magic items or something, or conditions. So now, left-hand side, armor class. Right now you have an armor class of 10. With dexterity modifier, it's still 10 because you don't have a high dexterity, and your touch armor class is 10. So let's go ahead and add the armor bonus. So add the plus armor for your splint mail, I believe. And now if you have a shield, it's another add a +1 there to the shield because you bought one of those too. The way shields work in this game is you only get +1 for your armor class. But a small shield gives you that bonus against 1 opponent. A medium shield gives you that armor class against 2. And a large shield gives you that bonus against 3 opponents in front of you. Size dexterity modifier, it would be automatic. It would show you. It would be there already if you did have a dex modifier for your dexterity attribute. The next one is size modifier. Size modifier you do get against larger creatures. They have a harder time of hitting you. I believe your armor class goes up too. But the problem with that is, what if you try to fight other creatures of the same size? Then I would not use that field from round to round, combat to combat, because this list on this tab stays that way throughout the entire game unless you manually change it. Things like that I would manually change from round to round in combat using the modifier window in the bottom left hand corner of the screen, or the modifier window in the top right hand corner of the screen. So I wouldn't fill that field in. Natural armor, I would only do that if you're like a chain shape or something, or a druid. Deflexa modifier, probably for monks. Miscellaneous modifier is like maybe magic items. Okay, then below that is an SR. That stands for spell resistance. So monsters, there are a lot of monsters that do have spell resistance, yes. But for characters to get it, it's usually if they get it through a spell or a magic item. So that's where you type it in there. On the right-hand side is standard combat fields for melee and ranged. So if you're just going to do a standard melee attack or a ranged attack that doesn't really that has anything to do with the weapons you have listed below, you can just use that for combat instead. Maybe you picked up an ale stein from the floor and wanted to bash it across somebody's head or something. That's what I would use that for. Or throw something at somebody. So grapple, pummel, and overbear, that's unarmed combat. And that's explained in the player's handbook, the rules on how to perform those actions in combat. And that's where you would roll it right there. And then, of course, there's touch attack. So that covers the entire combat tab, I believe. So now let's move on to the next one. Okay, the next tab is spells. So the spells tab is if you were a spellcaster or a race that gets spells naturally, inherent spell ability, like gnomes do, you would actually add them here. But since dwarves do not have a spellcasting ability, you don't get spells, so you're going to leave this field alone, this tab alone. You're not going to use it. So the next tab is the notes tab. In the notes tab, a lot of the stuff you're going to type in manually. This is where you type in what you look like and your background. One of the important fields is alignment. So a lot of Dungeon Masters, when they're running D&D, they use alignment in their game, and that's where you type it in. The only thing that's automated on this tab is the languages tab. So if you click on Edit List, you can actually add more languages. So if you look at your dwarf race, common, dwarven, gnome, goblinoid, halfling, elven, ogre, giant, and troll. Depending on the DM, I don't run my game that way where they automatically get all those languages. But I do let you get a choice of those languages when you pick out languages. And I always let everybody have common and their racial language. And then for every intelligent bonus that you have, you get an additional language. The only thing you have to worry about is the spelling. Yeah, it has to be exact. And to check that, the Dungeon Master would have to look at the chat window. Right above the chat window, the chat field, there's a drop-down menu that lets you choose the languages, and the wording has to be exact. Like dwarven is dwarven, has to be spelled exactly like that. Goblinoid is goblin. It's not spelled goblinoid, it's actually goblin. Go ahead and add goblin, and I'll show you how that works. So go ahead and type in goblin. There you go. Go ahead and stop editing that. Now in the chat window, go ahead and drop the drop-down menu, and choose goblin. Hello, fellow Gobby. So I just talked to you in goblin. Can you understand it? Green skin. There you go. So you can talk to other players in different languages if you want, for fun. I can also, if you're eavesdropping on a bunch of goblins talking, I'll go ahead and paste it all in there for you so only you can understand it. Things like that. So that wraps up our video on how to create a fighter in Castles Crusades for Fantasy Grounds. If you have any questions, please post below and I'll try to answer them when I can. And if you have any requests of other character classes you would like me to create, or any other kind of tutorials on how to use Fantasy Grounds with Castles Crusades, please go ahead and comment below and I'll respond to them when I can. Thank you.